This special episode of the Business of Creativity series was filmed at Cannes Festival of Creativity 2026. I sat down with Cameron Adams, co-founder of Canva, and I'm excited to bring that conversation to you now.
Creativity is all about doing it wrong.
Cameron, alongside co-founders Melanie Perkins and Cliff Obrecht, launched Canva, an online graphic design platform with a simple but radical idea. The design should not belong exclusively to people with expensive software and years of training.
The mission that we set Canva up to 14 years ago was to empower the world to design.
Yeah.
And we deliberately made that very expansive. For us, designing is about achieving a goal. It's about taking an idea that is in your head and using that to drive some action, whether that's building a business or creating a movement or teaching a better classroom.
What Canva has done is fundamentally shift who gets to be creative. That's Cameron Adams. This is the Business of Creativity series, brought to you by Amazon Ads. So here I am, Cameron Adams. How wonderful to meet you. Wonderful to be here. We're here at Cannes. So if we look a bit sort of, exhausted, it is the heat outside.
Exhausted but tanned.
But tanned, yeah, if only. So Canva, what an amazing success.
Thank you.
Now it stands for, canvas, wasn't it? It was short for canvas.
It was. You've done your research.
Well,
it was.
Do you know, I always have a thing about, why is that called that? Because it often gives you a little clue to something, it's descriptive.
Well, it's interesting that we're here in Cannes, where you don't pronounce the S as well, because we were trying to get the domain canvas.com.
Of course.
Wasn't going to happen.
That's not going to happen.
And we had a French developer who was working for us at the time. And we said to
Great.
him, how do you spell canvas in French? Or how do you pronounce canvas in French? And he's like, Canva.
Canva. And you went, there you are.
But it had the silent S on it, but we didn't know that.
I love that. You see, that stories like that are so important. I mean, I always say to people, people often say to me, because we did a lot of work helping entrepreneurs get up and running and finding them finance and advising them. And they'd often go, what should I call the company? And I'm really worrying about it. And I always used to say, look, don't worry. And if you can sell a cigarette called a Camel, you shouldn't be too bothered about it. But on the other hand, if I was going to start a search engine, I think Google is a really, really good name. So, but it's But
Canva, so you reckon names don't matter? You can do anything with any name.
You can do anything with any name. But I like Canva because what I like about it, it begins to tell a story. And in a way, every company, every brand, is a story.
Yeah,
this is what
that's
we
a good
did.
point.
So your story, you were growing up in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you didn't exactly, you qualified as in law, but never practiced. Was that you decided, well, this is terrible, I'm not going to do this? So that journey, why law? Why kind of, then deciding not to do it?
Well, I've always had a creative drive. Like, I always wanted to draw and create things or code things on a computer. But I am half Asian. My mum is Chinese. Yeah. So when you get the marks for law, you've just got to do law. So to placate my mother, I did law in university. I was slightly interested in law through high school. I did legal studies. I didn't actually do too many creative subjects at high school because I kind of felt like I had the bases covered just through my life and what I like to do outside of school. But I ended up doing computer science and law at university.
Wow. When was that? When we're talking now?
We're talking 1998.
So that was very early days of what was about to happen, the explosion of the internet and all of that, social media.
Yeah.
So that was that, did you have a kind of foresight of that, or was that just got lucky?
I don't think the dot-com boom quite hit in Australia like it did in the States.
Yeah.
So people were accessing the web, but it wasn't as much of a kind of business startup kind of thing down in Australia. I actually wound up getting a job through university, which was doing graphic design. So I didn't want to study it, but it was definitely my passion, and I segued that into a job. And I started designing catalogs for mail order software. And as part of that, they needed a website. And with my computer science background, I started a bit of coding, converted those designs into their very first website, and that got me into web development, which has shaped the next 25 years for me.
You know, one of the things I often say to people is do interesting things and interesting things will happen to you. And that's a lovely example of kind of did all those things and look at the doors it opened up. Never forget.
That's a great
Never
philosophy.
forget that sort of, you know, sometimes I think people say to me, John, do you have a 5-year plan? And I say, no, I have a 5-minute plan, actually, because if I can make what I'm doing now really interesting, I don't know what that's going to open up.
Well, I hope this podcast is going longer than 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, it definitely will. So there we are, Melbourne. And then you work with Google. You were on Google Wave.
Yeah, so I forgot to apply for any jobs at the end of university. Started my own company, which is a web design agency. It's a very small one. And did a lot of writing throughout that period. So I had my own blog, which I kind of explored technology and creativity through. And that got the attention of someone at Google, who was the first product designer at Google. And he referred me to someone in the Google Sydney team because they were looking for a designer to help them out on this crazy new project that they were working on. I knew nothing about it when I walked in for the very first interview. But they were excited to have me. And I got a job there, walked in on the first day, and they ushered me into this room that was completely blacked out. It was one of their meeting rooms that they had covered all the windows with paper. It was quite sweaty in there. There were 4 engineers in there who had been prototyping this product for 6 months. And it was my job to turn it into something beautiful and usable. And I spent the next 6 months doing that until it launched internally. And we started developing it for the next 3 or 4 years.
And it didn't ultimately work, did it? But that I'm just thinking, if the idea of something that didn't quite work, but did you have a sense of that, or was it because they pulled the plug on it eventually, didn't they?
It taught me a lot about product management and product development, and also about timing. So a lot of what it was trying to do, it was a real-time communications platform that was kind of like a merge between Slack, Google Docs, and almost Canva in terms of like creative expression. But it was a bit too early. People weren't quite used to this in a web browser. They weren't used to it in the way that they worked. People were still using MSN Messenger and things like that. So I think the timing of an idea is really critical, and we didn't get the timing right, as well as a whole bunch of other things, but the timing played, I think, a critical role in the lack of success for Google Wave.
Yeah, absolutely right. There's an amazing documentary called General Magic, and it was a division set up by Scully when Steve Jobs.
I remember this one.
And how they developed basically the iPhone. They developed the iPhone. So launched it, I think this is early 90s, and it was all there, everything that was going to eventually work, but the timing just wasn't right, the technology wasn't there. And sometimes understanding that is crucially important. You know, have you got all the other bits that can make this work?
But can you understand it, or do you just need to do it and find out?
Do it and find out. Well, to a certain extent you can, but there are things you can do. Can the network support this? Does it have the speeds and things like that? Or as somebody once said, if you're leading somebody through a jungle, you need to be 10 yards in front of them, not 100. And it's always that kind of working out, where am I in this? So there we are. So you do that, and then you're deep down, your passion is design, graphic design. I studied graphic design at the London College of Printing, which I loved it. I always loved design. I always loved that, the way things looked and felt, but I was much more about ideas. I loved ideas, and you know, so that's why I eventually went into advertising. So you've got this passion. Where did going back for a moment there, and I'm looking very interesting background. I've got this great theory that people who are sort of outsiders slightly create greater success because they have that ability to observe, and from a very early age they have that sense of, I'm sort of outside, I'm looking in. Born in London, but I came from an Irish family. Yeah. And I kind of worked out that certain things were different, and you become a great observer. And I think that's crucial for a creative person. Did you ever feel that sense of being, you know, your mother was Chinese, you said, and Australia, not that, you know, but you saw different societies at work. Did that
I think
help?
for me, playing at the intersection of things has always been
Yeah.
really fruitful. Like my own background in terms of technology and design coming together was very unique at the time. And I think that really led to Canva's success, being able to fuse those things together and create a product very rapidly, knowing what the technology was capable of, but also knowing what experience we wanted to deliver.
Yeah.
Having those two things tightly coupled was really important. And I think that plays out through all aspects of your life. When two things collide, that's where the interesting things happen.
Absolutely. And so did you have any sort of design heroes, people that you look to say, that's the work I really love?
You're going to put me on the spot, but I do have some design heroes. Stefan Sagmeister was
Yeah.
a real inspiration to me in my early days.
He's great, isn't he? Wonderful,
Yes.
man. If you haven't, that's great reference. Stefan Sagmeister is a really, really interesting man who is a fantastic designer. And I think he takes every 7th year off and goes around and produces a book. He's absolutely wonderful.
Yes, it's that creative process that I really love about him. And I remember sitting in university flicking through Graphis magazines.
Great magazine.
And reading about that creative process. And that really inspired me to kind of structure my own creative thinking and how I approach problems.
Yeah.
Even further back, one of my favorite all-time graphic designers is Saul Bass, who innovated on so many different mediums, but particularly his work in film titles. Just incredible.
Yeah. I fortunately met him actually, and he was a lovely, lovely man. Great man, lovely, kind of constantly curious. And I was giving a talk, and it was big design festival. I was giving a talk about film and how I did it. And so he came to it, and he came up to me afterwards and said, "That's really interesting how you take 60 seconds and less and tell a story in it." But I love the fact that he was. I mean, he was famous designer in the world, but still curious. Fundamentally important, whatever you're doing.
I almost tried to follow in his footsteps. I did a bit of title design for film and events. And I actually fused it with technology back in 2010 for a bunch of conferences that I was working on and speaking with. So yeah, definitely some Saul Bass heritage there. Well, and then another designer I want to call out who's a bit more modern is Gemma O'Brien, who's this incredible type illustrator.
Yeah.
She's Australian, goes under the Instagram handle Mrs. Eves, but the work that she does is mind-blowing, and I've admired it forever.
It's lovely that then I'm with Canva, you can have a whole thing about typography, and I've always loved typography, the way something looks and feels. And for me, it was a great American type designer called Herb Lubalin, and who had his great line was, "Nobody notices great design, they're too busy reading it." And which I've always loved, that sense of your function is to kind of make it legible and readable. That the two things that typography has to be. Does it look as though it's interesting to read, legible? And then do you want to, can you read it? Those two things which are fundamentally important.
There's a book on my shelf that I constantly refer to. It's The Art of Typography, and it details like all the minutiae of laying out text, from paragraph leading to kerning, and I don't think modern designers pay enough attention to it.
That's an interesting observation, Cameron, because I always find it quite dangerous, this, because I say, when I went to art school, we were told, look, there's an exhibition of Rubens on the tape. You've got to go and see it. You've got to look at it. Look at this, look at that, look at that. And it wasn't because they wanted us all to go and paint like Rubens. There was no way we were going to do that. Yeah. But what they were saying to us, just stand in front of something that is beautifully done, and you will learn things without realizing it. And I do think today there's a great lack of curiosity of where things came from. Why did we do that? Why was it like that? And I think you're lesser creative person for that, understanding that it has a history.
Do you actually see a lack of that curiosity?
Yeah, I genuinely do. I mean, I gave a talk to some students not that long ago, communication students, and I just asked them, how many of you seen all of the Grand Prix Grand Prix winners from Cannes. About 3 hands went up. And I said, you know, it takes about an hour and a half, and you'd learn so much. And it was a great, I think, a great shame. You know?
But are they getting so much of it now through all the other media that they consume?
I think it is a sense of what happened yesterday isn't relevant today. And of course it changes, of course it evolves, of course it does that. But to understand where it came from, you know, I always thought Tarantino is really, really interesting because he absolutely understands film. He understands, you know, why that, and he goes back, looks at old movies, and it does infect you. And it does help you understand where you're going. And I'm trying to move it on. But if you haven't seen where it's come from or appreciated how it's come from, then how are you going to do it? How do you know?
Doesn't that contrast to what you were saying earlier, though, in terms of bringing a fresh perspective to things and not necessarily needing to follow the way that it's always been done?
We are always bringing a fresh, in my view, a fresh perspective. I believe that there's first we copy, then we create. I mean, all great artists copied. Picasso copied until he found that's the way I want to be. And of course, the secret is copy great stuff. You know, don't copy rubbish.
Yeah.
You know, so I do think I'm a passionate believer in going to understand the future. You've got to appreciate the past.
We try and bring a beginner's mindset to everything that we do at Canva, because we're often entering areas that we've never been before, as leaders, as team members, as people producing a product that no one has used before. And there's a little power in a bit of naivety, like not knowing,
totally,
not knowing what you can't do is extremely powerful.
It's kind of, we call it creative ignorance, don't we? You approach it, but yeah, we could go on this conversation. It could go like a game of table tennis, isn't it? I'll bet that one back. I've always said brands should think less about marketing and more about entertainment. Audiences are tired of being sold to, but they still enjoy things like drama, truth, humor, beauty and excitement, which are exactly the things you need to channel if you're trying to convince people to visit somewhere. Junta de Andalusia did it wonderfully when it worked with Amazon ads to capture the uniqueness of the region. They used the full breadth of Amazon to tell Andalusian stories, from Alexa audio tour, interactive gaming on Twitch, and brand-funded documentary on Prime Video, through to physical branding on Amazon, fresh bags, lockers, and even more. Everything led potential travelers back to their Amazon brand store to start trip planning. You know, in just 1 month, the campaign engaged nearly 17 million people in the region.
It's just an incredible region to explore and hopefully to keep exploring.
So, don't try to sell, try to inspire. Learn more about custom campaigns with Brand Innovation Lab at advertising.amazon.com. Well, we were having a lovely philosophical conversation about the creative process. And the other thing I would say, there is no right or wrong.
No, of course not.
And
creativity is all about doing it wrong.
Doing it wrong and then learning from that. But anyway, going back to Canva. So there you are. You've done Google Wave. You've learned a huge amount from that. And so you woke up one morning and went, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to democratize, which I love the idea of, democratize design. Did that come from a conversation? Was it a passion? Was it?
As you said, you don't know what you're doing in 5 minutes' time. Back then, neither did I. It was kind of forced on us because Google Wave got cancelled by a bunch of Google execs. They tried to force me to work on Google Circles, if you remember that, which is like their social network, which was extremely terrible. I lasted about 2 weeks on that. And then me and a couple of other Google engineers looked around inside Google, and I think kudos to Google for this, that they give a lot of people freedom to find the next thing that they're going to work on and come up with new ideas, which is where innovation is born. So we looked around, we pitched a few teams around the world of things we could do, but we ultimately didn't land on something that we're passionate about. But we were still passionate about communication. So I left Google with 2 of the engineers, and we we built a new style of email product. It was called Fluent, and we ran that for a year. We built the product for about 6 months. It got leaked to the press, and it generated a whole bunch of buzz around it, which we totally weren't ready for. So we found ourselves then having to go and raise funding to enable all this growth that was landing on our doorstep. So we actually spent the next 6 months in Silicon Valley trying to raise money, which we were terrible at. None of us were business people. We didn't know how to pitch people who could probably give us money. And we came back at the end of that whole session with no cash. We burnt a lot of our customers because we hadn't been doing product development, and we weren't sure what we were doing. But very fortunately, my old boss at Google, Lars Rasmussen, who's actually one of the founders of Google Maps, he introduced me to a couple who he met kiteboarding, as you kind of randomly do in the world of startups.
Yes.
He met this couple who he was impressed by their drive, impressed by their vision, and they just moved to Sydney. So I went and had a meeting with them and started hearing about Mel's idea for Canva and democratizing design. Even then, it wasn't 5 minutes later. I was still in the throes of our startup and trying to get it across the line. So I was like, not right now, maybe later. I've got my own great idea that I'm working on. Tried to get more funding, didn't happen. A few months later, my wife actually said, look, this startup's not working out. Why don't you get back in touch with that couple that you were talking to, because you seem to really get energized by them. And I did. I hit them up. They were actually in San Francisco when I asked for another catch up, and we had a Skype back in the days when people actually Skyped.
Remember Skype.
And they gave me an update on where they were. They also hadn't been having much luck getting funding.
They were talking about democratizing design.
Yeah,
that was their.
So Mel had done a bit of a pitch deck for Canva. They'd been working on their previous product, which was a yearbook business. How can we enable schools to make yearbooks better? And from that, they wanted to take it even bigger. Not just yearbooks, but anything you could design. Yeah. So that was the genesis of Canva. And Mel had a bit of a pitch deck that she had designed and put together, and they'd been shopping it around. I hadn't had any luck getting funding yet, particularly because they weren't quite sure how they would build the product. They had no tech team. They didn't have someone who could help them bring it to life. And that was my skill set.
That was you.
So we joined forces in July 2012 and launched a product a year later, and it's grown like crazy since then.
Going back over there, so there you are, you've got your prey, and there comes a moment, isn't there? When do you go, this isn't working, and it's one of the greatest problems a lot of entrepreneurs have, which is, when do I give up? When do I move on? And stories are legion of somebody who was about to give up. But what was it in your mind that made you go, apart from your obviously very perceptive wife, very important to have a very perceptive wife, I think.
It's a great help.
It's a wonderful help. It should be always recognized. But what was it in your mind that went, yeah, you're right? Was it something you felt deep down? Or
when you get a lawsuit is a good time to stop working on an idea.
Not recommended. I don't recommend lawsuits.
We actually had Google contacted us and was like, we're not too sure about whether this idea infringes upon previous work you've done. So that was one signal. The other signal was that we talked to a bunch of both VC funds in Silicon Valley, as well as a lot of tech companies. And tech companies are constantly fishing for new talent, for acquisitions and acqui-hires. And we talked to a few. We had talked to Square, we talked to Dropbox, and my two co-founders were kind of getting interested in that. They're a bit sick of the kind of the roller coaster. Yeah. And getting a few $1 million and some shares to go work somewhere comfortable was getting appealing to them. It wasn't quite appealing to me. Like, I never really want to go into another company again and work for someone else. So I was keen to continue doing it, but the wheels were starting to fall off. And as I said, the pressure from our customers who hadn't seen any updates in months was mounting, and the writing was on the wall.
And so that moment you said, this is it. And then obviously a passion of yours was creativity, was design, and then you got together Canva, we're going to democratize design. But I always think brilliant ideas are kind of why didn't I think of that?
Of course.
You know, but why did I let that one go by? But it is one of the marks, I think, of a great idea when you think, oh, I wish I'd done that. Did you feel when you were doing this, and you three of you were together, and I want to talk a little bit about how you pitched the company, because obviously you had to get finance, and that wasn't easy. But that sort of coming together, this is it, this is what we're going to do, democratize design. And it seems to me you had a perfect partnership. Three of you, I always say the Holy Trinity, very good, work for God, you know, can work for you. So you've had this perfect setup of you kind of, the sort of technology understanding, creative background. Your two other partners, what were they bringing?
So the thing that I was really struck with when I first met them was just the thought they'd put into the business side of things, which is not just making money, which they were also very good at, but the understanding of culture, bringing a team together, finding talent, and providing this vision that aligns everyone and enables you to move a group of people forward. Mel, the visionary, Cliff, consummate COO, just gets things done, will roll up his sleeves to help out wherever. They just seriously impressed me. Yeah. And in them, I saw the gaps that had clearly come through in me during my time on Fluent. Inability to raise funds, really think about a business model, but created a great product and thought about all the technical side of things. So it was just like putting a glove on when I first met them.
I love that. A partner of mine once said, you know, a company is like a great band. You have a great lead singer, great, lead guitar, bass guitar, drummer, and everybody understands what everybody else does. And the secret is they aren't all trying to do each other's job. You know, you can see in that structure that you had this almost, but really wonderful kind of combination of people with talents. And people forget that, the need to have balancing skills that all respect what each other does.
The other aspect of it is also having just a bit of overlap as well. So being able to support each other as you're thinking about team growth, like you should all be able to contribute to hiring and thinking about culture. And, you know, Cliff should be able to also contribute to the product. So like just having enough overlap that you can also talk together about things and not end up too siloed and individual is really important.
Crucially important, isn't it? That awareness of it. But in the end, ultimately, yes, you know, Mick Jagger can play the guitar, but Keith Richard is actually much better at it.
It's actually flowed through into our structure for Canva itself. So you talked about the Holy Trinity. We talk about the triad, and all of our product teams are built around the triad of design, product management, and engineering. And that really harkens back to what we had with me, Mel, and Cliff.
So it's been huge success. You know, the democratization of creativity is something I've always been passionate about. And, you know, we've now got AI. How do you see the future? How do you kind of think this is going to be fantastic for us? It's a challenge for us. We have to answer that.
The mission that we set Canva up to 14 years ago was to empower the world to design. And we deliberately made that very expansive, but also not prescriptive. Empowering the world to design could mean a whole bunch of different things. It could mean a product that you create. It could also mean just running a bunch of classrooms where you teach people to design. And we see AI as a real amplifier to that mission. We've always used the best tools that we had at our beck and call to empower the world to design. Back when we started, that was web browsers, it was mobile phones. And with the introduction of AI, it is like the next layer of technology that we can use to bring design to more people around the world. And when we use the word design, a lot of people think about design as just being a very visual thing, like a picture that you stick on the wall. But for us, designing is about achieving a goal. It's about taking an idea that is in your head and using that to drive some action, whether that's building a business or creating a movement or teaching a better classroom. And Canva now does that for an incredible number of people. 250 million people every month.
Which is phenomenal. I was on the board of trustees of the Design Museum, and we constantly had to fight people thinking, well, I won't go to the Design Museum, it's for designers, and it's about making things look nice. And we actually did get them to kind of run a whole campaign about humanity's best friend, because we forget what design actually does. Without design, bridges wouldn't work. Without design, cars wouldn't work. It isn't just the color; it's the fundamentals of it.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful that you've got that ambition and creating it. I've talked about AI, and I say to people, don't think about it as a tool. Think about it as something you collaborate with, and that's unique. We haven't really had that before, and that up to this point in time, we've always had tools that we use, and suddenly you've got something you collaborate with, and you've got to master it, because otherwise it will master you, and you've got to bring what values you. You bring empathy, you bring imagination, you bring all those things. But I do think AI is going to unlock a huge amount, and getting people to realize, don't think about it as kind of it can save you money over here. Think about what it can help create, what it can help grow.
I kind of oscillate between tool and collaborative partner, because we try and shape the experience of using AI as very much a collaborative process. But at the end of the day, you're also choosing to call up that AI when you want it. So in that regard, it's kind of a tool, because you pick it up when you want it. AI is not picking you up when it wants you, but the actual experience of working with it is very collaborative.
Which is great. And then it's a kind of, but you're the creative director now.
Exactly.
We're all creative directors, aren't we? All of a sudden, that's a great thing. So here we are, huge success, as I say. Do you have a creative philosophy yourself? Do you think about, this is what I believe in terms of?
Not a driving creative philosophy, but definitely a few principles that I subscribe to. One is smashing things together.
Yeah.
So I believe strongly in colliding ideas, bringing two worlds that normally lived separately and bringing them together. And I think, as I said before, that intersection between unique things that no one has thought of combining before is where a lot of creativity happens.
Yeah. Juxtaposing one thing against another. A lot of humor is like that, isn't it? You kind of, and so much creativity is about bringing disparate things together that aren't normally together. And you see it in humor, you see it in art, you see it in all kinds of things. I like that.
And then the other principle I subscribe to, and my wife and I have this great mug at home, and on the side of it, it says, just say yes, you'll figure it out later. And I find that drives an incredible amount of creativity. It's kind of the corollary of constraints breed creativity. But when you put yourself forward or put yourself in a position where you desperately need to create something, that is often when you find the greatest inspiration.
And I've always said, I think all great creative people are optimists. They may look miserable, they may be good, but ultimately deep down they're optimists, because they believe this idea is going to change the world. And pessimism is the fastest way of destroying ideas. So that sustaining of kind of optimism is fun and say, yes, let's work it out. Don't worry. Yeah. It's important that. So there we are. And so what would you say to an entrepreneur thinking about starting out? What's the thing that you've walked away from going, God, that was something, I wish I'd known that before, or this is what I should have done?
I think two things for entrepreneurs. One is connections are really important. You can often just want to put your head down, build a product, and try and make it all happen yourself. But when I reflect on everything great that's happened in my life, it has been through connecting with other people, whether that's finding a business partner, or finding a personal partner, or finding a funder, an investor, or finding a great product designer who can help amplify your team and take your product to the next level. Creating those connections between other people is really vital. As an introvert, that can often be hard, but putting yourself in environments like Cannes Lions and going out and meeting people, having 101 conversations where you find that one conversation that actually brings value for you is really important. And particularly when you're running a startup, you need those connections. The other one is that you need to be deeply passionate about the area that you're going into. I often see people who kind of just want to make a quick buck. They're like, oh, crypto's big right now, or AI is big, what can I do in that area? But when you're building a business of meaning and of impact, as I'm sure you know, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes years, it takes many ups and downs, it's a real roller coaster. and being able to ride that roller coaster with passion and then bring a team along with you on that journey requires you to believe in what you're going after, not just about making a quick buck, but believing in the impact that you're having, in a new view of the world that you want to see, on making the world a better place, essentially. And that's how we've treated Canva. It's something that we're passionate about as a decades-long journey for all of us. And that's what drives us to continue doing it.
I think that's a lovely piece of advice. And I kind of say to people, money has a voice, but remember, it doesn't have a soul. And of course, it lubricates, it does all that. But as soon as you make money the driving force, in my view, it's all over.
Yeah.
And I think that's such wonderful advice. Cameron, thank you. I mean, I know you've probably told.
I think we could talk for hours.
Yeah, we could go on about. There are other things, and acquisitions, and staying creative at scale, and all those things. But it's really wonderful what you're doing, and it's I think bringing creativity to everyone is such a wonderful, wonderful thing to do.
Thank you,
Cameron. That was great. Thank you very much.
Great
really,
to chat
really
with
great.
you.
Really good.
If you want to explore how creativity can work for you, head over to thebusinessofcreativity.com. See you next time.